Well, down around Cape St. Mary's, especially in the older days when the place was just being settled, people used a particular kind of boat. The boat was called a spread sail punt. Now, a spread sail punt was perhaps 22 feet long, had two masts, a main mast, and there was a jib that came from that, and a great square sail that went up from there, and right on the stern behind the tiller was another smaller mast, and that sail hung out over the water. Now, it was called a spread sail mast simply because it had no ropes to raise and lower it. They used a long spreader, as they called it, that went up on the diagonal into the peak, and there kept the sails taut. Well, fishermen used it to go fishing. They used it to go out and get bait. They used it to go travel from one place to the other. It was the most important possession perhaps they had. Well, there were three fishermen who owned a boat, and one day they were turning around and looking at it to get ready for the next year's fishing season. And they sized it up, and they said, you know, I think we need a new boat for the next season. Yes, he said, perhaps we do. So that evening over supper, they were sitting around and talking to their mother. And they said, Mother, you know, we think we need a new boat for next season. All right, she said. I think then you should go in and cut one and cut the wood for one. Yes, they said, that's what we're going to do. And I tell you what, Mother, said Bill, who was the oldest one, said, I'll tell you, you go and bake me a bun of bread, because I love your bread. And tomorrow morning I'll get up and I'll go in the woods. I know just exactly where it all, the wood we need is. Yes, he said, go on and do that. So the next morning he gets up and the smell of fresh bread is everywhere in the house. And he turns around and he picks up his axe and takes his bun of bread and a jug of water, and off he goes. Well, he walks and walks and walks till he gets to that spot in the forest where he knows just exactly where the right wood is. And as he's laying down his gear and taking off his coat and getting set up to do his day's work, he hears a rustling in the bush. And when he looks up, there's a little old lady. Oh, I smells bread, fresh bread. Oh, I loves bread, I loves bread. Give me a piece of that bread, will you? Give me that bread. No, says Bill, I can't do that. Why can't you do that? Well, I got to build me a boat. I got to spend all day cutting wood down here. And by golly, you can't be at this in here with me. I need all the bread for myself. So you get out of here and go on. Oh, she said, and off she went. Well, Bill got ready and he took up his axe and went over to the first tree he saw, and he leaned off to give it a good smack. And when the axe hit against the tree, it didn't cut into it at all. In fact, it came up solid, boom, just like that, and there was a big notch taken right out of the blade of the axe. When he looked at it and he thought, oh, that's terrible. I mean, my axe is spoiled. He said, well, maybe that was the wrong tree. And he went over and he took the other tree and he went smack like that. And sure enough, another big notch came right out of the axe blade. Well, it was no good carrying on for the rest of the day. So he turned around, picked up all his gear and went home. And that night at supper time, he turned around and he said to his mother, boys, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, the strongest wood ever. Well, said Tom, his brother, he said, you leave it to me. He said, I'll go in tomorrow. So Mother baked me a bun of bread and I'll be off. So the next morning, that's exactly what happened. Got up, took the bread, took the jug of water, and off he went. And just as he was setting down his gear right at that very same spot to start cutting wood, he heard a rustling in the throat. And sure enough, when he looked up, there was the little old lady again. Ooh, bread. I smells bread. Ooh, I loves bread. Give me that bread, will you? No, he said, I can't give you that bread. Well, why not? Well, that's because I'm going to be here cutting wood to make a boat, and I needs it all for my own energy. So you can't have any at all. Oh, go on, get out of here. Go on. Oh. And off she went. Well, this fellow took his axe and he went up, and this time when he struck into the tree, it didn't come up solid. The axe passed right through the tree and it shattered just like glass. Shards going everywhere. He picked up his axe and went at the second tree and it shattered and went everywhere. A few more trees and exactly the same. It was clear he was going nowhere. Well, so he took his stuff and he went home. Told the story at supper time. Well, said Jack, who was the youngest of all three of them, maybe it's my turn to go in tomorrow. Mother, bake me a bun of bread. And that's exactly what she did. The next morning, Jack got up and he took his axe, the bun of bread, a jug of water, and off he goes into the woods. Gets back to that exact same spot. He's laying everything down, getting ready to cut. And all of a sudden, he hears some rustling in the woods. Oh, oh, bread. Oh, I love bread. Oh, I smell fresh bread. Give me some of that bread. Well, said Jack, just like this. He said, I got to stay here and I got to build this boat. Cut all the woods, get ready to build my boat. So he said, I can't give you all of it because I need some for myself, but I'll give you half of it. Oh, take it. And she went over and sat down. She said, I'll just sit here. So he did. She sat over by the tree and Jack started cutting the wood. And this time when he up with his axe and he threw it, or swung it at the tree, I should say, this time the axe passed right through the tree. The tree fell over just like that. Couldn't believe it. Goes to the next tree, over it flops. The next tree, over it flops, flop, flop, flop. In a matter of minutes, he had enough wood cut to make up the ribs and the planks for the boat. Oh my, he said, I got to take this back now and saw it up to get ready for to make all the wood. No, she said, you don't need to do it. There's a saw over there, look. Jack said, I never brought no saw. She said, there's one over there. So he went over, picked up the saw. Went over and said, now, I'll just start to saw the length of her to make up the plank. And he only made 1 or 2 cuts with the saw, and the next thing you know, it's fallen off. Perfect pieces of wood. No trouble whatsoever. They were just going boom, boom, boom. As fast as he'd make 1 or 2 strokes with the saw, it was done. And in a matter of a few minutes again, he had all the wood cut right out. Well, now, he said, now I'm going to have to lug this stuff out and build it. No, she said, you don't have to do that. No, she said, look, there's a hammer and some nails right over there, look. He said, I never brought no hammer and nails. Oh, she said, that don't matter, there's hammers and nails over there, you can use that. And he went over and he picked up a few pieces of board and he started tacking it together, and the next thing you know, we had one frame made, then there was another one was made, and another one, another one. All framed out really quickly. Well, he turned around then, and he went, and he took the planks, and he nailed one on. And as soon as he nailed one on, the other one came on, splat, splat, splat. Boat was built in no time at all. He couldn't believe it. My dear, he said, I don't believe this at all. Well, she said, there's a wonderful boat that, you know. Yes, he said, I suppose it will be. Now, he said, if I only had some paint, I'd paint it. Oh, she said, look, here's a paintbrush. Now, she said, you think of whatever color you'd like that boat, and as soon as you lay that paintbrush on the boat, she'll be painted. So he thought about a pretty green, and he made us one sweep with the brush, and just like that, the whole boat was painted. Some yellow for the gunnels, just like that. And she was all painted right up. Well, there you are, he said. Well, he said, it's a fine looking boat, no doubt. But he said, how am I going to get it out of the woods here? Oh, she said, that's no trouble. This is a flying boat. A flying boat, yes, a flying boat. All you got to do is get into that, set up them spread sails. He did that, he set all the rigging up. Now all you got to say is, boat, fly. And that boat will fly. Oh, he said. And what about when I want to stop? Well, she said, all you got to do then is say, boat pitch. And the boat will come right down softly on the ground. All right, he said. Well, he thanked the lady for all of her help. He got in the boat and he said, now boat fly. And he got in there and he started rocking back and forth a little bit and he held onto the gunwales. And the next thing you know, up she rose. And off she went, cleared the treetops, got up high. Well, Jack was looking down. He'd never seen the world like this before. Wow, wow, wow. Well, he got up there next to the tiller and he turned around and she turned this way and she turned that way and she went all over the place. Well, so Jack, I've always wanted to know what's over there beyond in the sea. So he sailed a little further out from land. Didn't see much, and he sailed and sailed and sailed till eventually he saw green grass below. The grass, the greenest grass he'd ever seen, and some trees, and my goodness, all kinds of houses and lakes, and a huge house over there. Biggest house he ever saw in his life. He said, well, I must go down and have a look at that. So he swung the tiller around and she started to circle and circle and circle around and drop lower and lower, and then finally he said to the boat, boat pitch. Down, down, down it went and landed ever so gently on the grass. Well, just as he was getting himself sorted away and climbed over the side, there came the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen in his life. Oh, my goodness, what a beauty she was. Oh, long, long hair and flapping in the breeze, and it was just absolutely wonderful, wonderful. Well, she said, who are you? He said, I'm Jack from Newfoundland. And who are you? Well, she said, I'm Jane. Jane, yes. And Jane, where am I? Well, she said, you're in England now. England, he said. What am I doing over here in England? Well, he said, this is where you are. Well, and he said, now, what's this and that? And she told him different things he'd never seen before. And he said, well, what about that big house over there? She said, that's not a house, she said. That's a castle. A castle. Yes, a castle. My goodness. And who lives over there? And she said, the king. The king lives over in that castle. Yes, she said. My, oh my, oh my. She said, would you like to go over and see the castle? He said, well, we can't do that. He said, go in on the king and stuff. She said, no problem. She said, that's my dad. He said, you're a princess. Yes, she said, I'm a princess. Yeah, I am indeed. Well, anyway, over they went. And they introduced him to the king. And, well, the king was pretty amazed that somebody had come all the way over from Newfoundland. And the daughter said to him, well, she said, Dad, you should see how he came. He brought him outside and showed him the boat. Oh, my God, the boat was incredible. Well, he said, so this boat flies? Yes, he said. Well, he said, I'll tell you what. He said, there's a king up to the north, and he wants to be making war on me all the time. He said, now, if you were to take me up there in this boat, he said, maybe he'll be convinced that I got a strong army and won't attack me. Yes, said Jack, I can do that for you. So they got in the boat, and Jack said, boat fly, and the boat rocked and rolled and so on a bit, and up it went, and off they went. Yes, sirree. No time at all, they were up over the other castle. Well, says Jack, boat pitch. Boat circles around, and down they come. Now, of course, by this time, everybody in the other castle are all out looking at this amazing thing that's dropping down out of the sky. So the king goes up to the other king, and he says, now, boys, he said, look. He said, look at this fella I got. All kinds of magic he can do. Look, makes a boat fly and all that sort of stuff. He said, boy, I don't think you'd be too smart for you fellas to come down and try and invade us. No, said the other king, I don't think so. So he said, can we shake hands and agree that we'll always be at peace? Yes, he said, we can do that. So they shook hands, and next thing you know, the king and Jack get back in the boat, and off they go back to his castle. Boat pitch, he says. Down they go, right to the king's castle. Well, said the king, I'm ever so grateful for you. Now he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll give you that boat full of gems and gold and everything as a thank you for keeping the war away. Well, all right, said Jack, I can take that. So the men were piling the gold and the jewels and everything into the boat. And just as they were doing that, the princess goes over and tugs on her father's robe. What do you want? And she whispers in his ear. Well, said the king to Jack, looks like she kind of fancies you. And if you're open for it, what do you say you marry the princess? Oh, my golly, says Jack. Never ever thought of that in all my life. So, the next thing you know, they're wed. Big fancy wedding in the castle. Amazing. Well, said Jack, this has all been very nice, but I think I need to go home and get this boat to my brothers so they can go fishing. And why, with all of these jewels and stuff, the wife in tow, I'll be able to go home to my mother and be able to keep her in style for the rest of her life. Well, yes, said the king, I suppose that's the thing to do. So that's what happened. Jack and his new wife jumped into the boat, waved goodbye to everybody, boat fly, the boat rocks and rolls, and off they go. Jack heaves over the tiller and back to Newfoundland they come. Yes, sir, they get out over the water, just in the harbour. Jack said, now I'll scoot right in on the water and I'll make it look right pretty. So he told the boat pitch. The boat came down and started to skim in the water, and they cruised right up to his wharf. Well. Everybody was all excited, as you can imagine, in the community. And people flocked down on the wharf, and everybody was all excited to meet Jack's new wife. And, well, of course, the jewels and everything, nobody'd seen anything like that. And he was heaving it up in bags and laying it up on the wharf. Well, the two brothers, now they were awful excited about seeing everybody too, but the thing they were most excited about was the boat. And no sooner had Jack ever got everything out of the boat, when the next thing you know, the two brothers had jumped down in it. Oh, Jack, tell us, boy, how did you get this thing to fly? Well, he said, all you got to do is say, boat, fly. And with that, the two brothers let out the biggest yell, boat, fly. And the boat just flew right up into the sky. My goodness. Jack hadn't had a chance to tell him how to get it to stop at all. Well, as far as I know, they're up there still. And sometimes when you're down over Placentia Bay or down around Cape St. Mary's or on St. Mary's Bay, and on a beautiful clear night, and you look up and you see this spread sail punt going through the air, you might try and shout out to them, because I think it's Bill and Tom trying to find out how to make her stop. Well, sometimes young people don't put an awful lot of faith into what the old folks say. And that was the case many, many years ago for a young fellow by the name of George. Now, at that time, lots of people around Cape St. Mary's, Placentia Bay, St. Mary's Bay, they all were believing in the little people, the fairies. Some were this big, and perhaps some were only this big. The little people, the good people, they always called them. Now, George, of course, thought it was only a bunch of nonsense from them old people, and he never really paid much attention to the stories. And when his mother would give him a bun of bread to keep him safe from the fairies, he gladly accepted it. Well, he didn't believe it would keep him safe from the fairies so much as he loved his mother's bread, and he gladly accepted it and put it in his pocket for whenever he wanted to have it as a snack. Well, one day he was sitting down at supper to his mother and father, and he said, I wouldn't mind going over to visit Cousin John, who lives over in St. Lawrence. Well, you're only a young fella. That's a long trip for you to take. Look, the path is there. And I can walk that in a couple of 3 hours, sure. Well, no, I don't think you're old enough and on. Well, anyway, for several days he nagged and nagged and nagged. And finally, his father said to him, well, look, my son, I suppose you're getting older now, and I suppose it's about time you did some man things for yourself. Well, said the mother, I'll only let him go if he takes a couple of buns of bread to keep him safe from the fairies. And George said, all right, I'll take the bread. No problem with that. So the next morning he got up and he went to get ready to go on his own way. And his father said to him, now remember, if you come across any fairies, don't let them know that you saw them. Because if you do, they'll do you harm for sure. Or they might even take you and whisk you away, bread or no bread. All right, said George. So off he went. Well, he got over to the community, no trouble whatsoever. Spent a couple of days with his cousin. The next day he got up as he was told to do and started to walk back. Well, he gets about halfway home. And he thinks, you know, a wonderful present to give my mother might be some berries. And he didn't have much to pick berries in, but he thought, I could put some in my cap for sure. So he stopped, put down his little bag he had with him with some extra clothes in it, and walked up over a little bit of a hill, and sure enough, all kinds of berries. Whoa, he took off his cap and he started picking the berries. And as he was picking the berries, he heard the sweetest tin whistle music he ever heard. Dee-dee-diddly-diddly-dee, dee-dee-diddly-dee. Holy smokes, where's that coming from? Who's out there playing tin whistle? He looked around, couldn't see anybody. So he was only about halfway up the hill, so he said, well, I'll walk up a little further on and see if I can see anybody. So he did. Walked up to the top of the hill, looked around, and when he looked down towards his feet, there at the bottom was a ring of little people, all dressed in green with red caps, and in the middle, a fella playing on the tin whistle. Dee-dee-diddly-diddly-diddly-diddly-dee. And they held in hands and they running around in a circle of finest kind, the biggest kind of a dance and good time. Well, George couldn't believe it. And he crouched down and he snuck closer and closer and closer, forgetting all about what his father said about sneaking away and not letting him see him. Well, eventually the music stopped and the dancing stopped. And George stood up and he started to clap. And yay, he said, wonderful, wonderful. Well, as soon as he did that, all the fairies looked up at him. And they gave him a look like he'd never ever seen before. They were clearly upset. And one fellow was a little older and looked like he might be the leader. He put his hand down in his pocket and he pulled out something and he threw it just as far as he could. And as soon as he did that, George felt a pain in his right knee and he dropped down on the ground. Oh. He rubbed his knee. And when he looked up, the people were gone. Well, eventually he managed to get back up on his feet and he started to walk. But he was all pained and oh dear, just could barely hold his weight on the leg. And he hobbled and hobbled. And off he went home. Perhaps the most painful mile or two he ever walked in his life. He got home and his mother said, well, what's wrong with you? Well, said he twisted his leg getting the cap full of berries for his mother, which she was very thankful to have, but she was worried about his leg. Well, she put him to bed and she put a poultice on it and all that kind of stuff, but no avail. For a week or more, he lay in bed, couldn't hardly move. Well, said the mother, the only thing to do now is to take you to the doctor. And the only doctor around in that part of the world was in St. Pierre. So they got him down aboard the boat, set the sails, and off they went for St. Pierre. Well, they got to the doctor, and the doctor gave him this thing, and he gave him that thing, and the medicine, and he wrapped the leg, and he didn't wrap the leg, and he did a whole bunch of things. Nothing worked. So he had to give up and say, my son, go home. So they put him back in the boat and home he went. Well, mother and father were clearly very worried. And it grieved George to see them so worried. So he finally said to him, look, he said, here's the truth of what happened. And he told him about the dance. Oh, said his mother. Sure, there's no wonder the doctor in St. Pierre couldn't do nothing for you. No, that's a fairy hurt. And nothing can cure a fairy hurt other than the fairies themselves. So, my dear, you'll have that hurt as long as the fairies want you to have it. Well, he stayed in bed for most of the year. Couldn't do anything. He missed playing hockey with his friends. He missed going to the school concert. He missed it all. Until a year later, to the very day that he was watching the fairies in their ring of dance, he felt something happen in his knee. As the day went on, you could see a little tip of something black coming out through the side of his knee. And then it grew, and finally out, maybe a half-inch or more. He went and he got his hands on it and he gave it a very tight squeeze and he pulled. And out came a whole thorn, maybe about that long. He called out to his mother. He showed his mother what he'd taken out of his leg. Oh my, she said. That's a fairy thorn if there ever was one. And so took it over and wrapped it up very carefully and laid it over on the bureau on the side of the bed. As the day went on, the leg felt better. By the time the week had gone by, he was as good as new, out running around doing it all. From that time on, of course, George became a true believer in the little folks. And any time any other young fellow in the community ever came around and was mocking the fairies or making fun of the old folks, George would take that very thorn which he had kept to show them the very danger that the fairies could do. Okay.
Hi, I'm Nicole Hand. This is Austin Meisel and Anna Graham, and we're going to be playing some bassoon trios for you today. Anna and Austin are students at Memorial, and I play bassoon with the Newfoundland Symphony. We're really excited to play for the Cape series. It's my third time playing in various formations, and this time is a bit different. It's too bad we can't enjoy a meal and listen to the foghorn out at the Cape, but it's really, really lovely to be here at the Crow's Nest. We're going to play some trios for you by Ludwig Mildy. He was around sort of in the latter half of the 19th century in Prague, and if you're a bassoonist, then you would know his name from his various scale studies and etudes that every bassoon player has to learn. But yeah, these are a set of 14 trios. We've selected 6 for you, and yeah, I hope you enjoy them. Thank you.